There's something people say about death, which is that you actually die twice. The first time is when your body dies, and then the second time is when somebody thinks about you for the last time they say your name. Realistically, these two deaths are very close together. You think about life on a cosmic scale. You think about the age of the Earth relative to the human lifespan. You die, and then 20 years later, your buddies die. And then I guess you're just done. Some people try to get around this by becoming famous. They think that if they become a big star, then people are always going to remember them and they're always going to talk about you. Realistically, this is just not true. I mean, you think about Elvis. Nobody was bigger than Elvis. That's as big as a human being can get in terms of fame. And I mean, there are kids around right now who don't know Elvis. They couldn't tell you two things about the man's life. And that's Elvis we're talking about. If that's what happens to him, what hope do the rest of us have? I think the best way to think about legacy and immortality is thinking about the internet as an extension of the human brain. People talk about, the singularity, the Ray Kurzweil thing, where eventually humans are going to mesh with machines and that we're going to upload our, consciousness into a computer, and eventually humans and machines will become one thing. And I mean, I think it's like an interesting concept, but I think the best way to think about the singularity is the fact that we all already spend all of our time on the computer and looking at our phones. So the computer is already connected directly to our consciousness in terms of just attention and where it is we're actually putting all of our thoughts. You got to think about the internet as being a large container for all of human thought, all of our feelings and our ideas, and everything we're trying to communicate with the world. It's all being put into one large space. The internet really moves at two speeds simultaneously. The first speed is that of attention, which is very fast. This is scrolling. This is leaving little comments and, videos popping up and things happening and what everybody's talking about for the day. And this cycles faster and faster. And it's how we actually experience the internet. The internet also moves at a second speed, which is glacial. That is the speed of archive. That's the speed of everything we've ever put online. It all lives somewhere. I think we've all kind of intuitively figured out at this point that nothing online actually gets deleted. Best case scenario, it gets ignored and it gets, covered up by another thing. But nothing that you put online is ever actually gone. If you upload a video to YouTube and you delete it, they tell you it's deleted. But I think we all know that Google is probably lying to us, and that the video that you thought was deleted is actually on a server somewhere. And it's probably on multiple servers at once. And even if you can't access it anymore, even if they tell you it's been deleted, it's still there. You do still exist somewhere deep in the archives. And the fact that we experience the internet, like I'm saying, at this first speed, which is that of stimulation and attention and short-term memory, that gives us a sense that all the other stuff is just not there because we're not currently looking at it. But it's there. And not only does it live forever, but you couldn't delete it if you wanted to. And that's my hope for creating things online. That's why I dedicate so much of my energy to making these little videos and putting things out online. On the one hand, I do like, there's a short-term sense of me uploading things and people do watch them, and that's very exciting. But there's a second level, which is that the thing that's going to happen when people stop watching and the video itself still exists somewhere. And you think about things, like I'm saying, on a long enough timeline. Eventually, I will be gone. But I do think that everything we're putting online, it's still going to be there. There was a time early in the internet, in the 80s and the 90s, when storage costs were high and things were limited. And I think a lot of that 90s internet stuff, the kind of Wayback Machine stuff that you look at, that stuff, a lot of it is literally gone because there was no space for it. But at some point in the last, 10 years or so, I think we crossed a threshold where there are some very clever people at Google who are finding ways to store things and compress things. And storage costs are coming down to the point where all of this stuff is sticking around. And that's how I think about the internet, which is that the more I post, the more ideas I have that turn into a video or turn into something I write on Twitter or wherever, the more I post, the more of myself exists externally. So every time I have a thought and I post it online, the feeling I have in my head is, well, I don't have to think that thought anymore because it's done and it's out there and it exists in this giant container of the internet. It exists digitally in a form that I think will always be there. I mean, obviously, YouTube will probably change in the future, and I'm sure the experience of YouTube will look different and it'll feel different way in the future. But I do think it's going to stick around. Of all the platforms on the internet, I feel like this one in particular there's some smart people at Google. They're going to figure out a way to keep all this stuff somewhere. And it's not like I used to have the hope in my head that, maybe I'll make a video and then way after I'm dead, somebody's going to find it and the video goes viral and then I become famous, posthumously. But realistically, that's probably not going to happen. And it doesn't have to happen because the fact that the video file does exist somewhere means that I'm not actually gone. Even if nobody's looking at it at the moment, it is still there, which to me is extremely comforting. My thing about creating online and why I feel such a deep connection to the kind of stuff I'm doing now is that every single thing I put out, every thought that I record and I'm done with and I leave external to my mind, every thought makes my future death slightly less tragic. At this point, I do feel like I'm going to live for quite a while, but that's what everybody thinks. Who knows? But the idea, my real fear of death is not really death itself, because to me, I feel like whatever it is that happens after your death, it's happened to billions of people already. It's going to happen to all of us. And I do believe deep down that we're all going to the same place. But the real sadness and the real agony of death, in my mind, is the idea that I can't die with more stuff in my head that I never got around to. I can't have more ideas inside that never got a chance to get put down somewhere. That is unbearable to me. That's why I feel so compulsive about writing, about creating, because I want the feeling of dying to be one of getting to the end of my own brain, where if you go inside somehow, if you could actually take a camera to the inside of my head, I want my death to be a clearance sale. Everything's gone at that point. And not only is it gone, but it exists somewhere. And it exists along everybody else's thoughts and feelings and everything else that they put out. And that is immortality in my mind. So that's one way to think about it, which to me, that actually does feel somewhat old-fashioned. The idea of creating a bunch of YouTube videos and social media posts as a means of leaving a legacy behind, that feels very quaint in my mind. Similar to like, writing books or something. Some people think that they're going to write, if they write a book, that's going to live, that they'll leave that behind, and that's going to be, where they put all of their thoughts and feelings, and that it'll, live in an archive. But you think about books as a physical object. Take a paperback book from 40 or 50 years ago. It's already kind of falling apart. And that's only been 40, 50 years. People spill coffee on books. Books go out of print and they get buried in a hole somewhere and worms eat the page. Books are a very bad way of leaving something behind. But like I'm saying, the idea of my YouTube videos living forever and social media posts and everything that I've put online, that is at one level kind of silly, because in 100 years, there's going to be exponentially more videos and other things out there. So very unlikely that anybody's ever going to watch any of this stuff past a certain point. So I think there's a second way to think about this, which is that everything we put online at this point, especially in the last few years, is all being used to train AI. Everything that we're putting online at this point is being used. Everything we put on YouTube is being used by Google to train their LLM, Gemini or whatever. Everything we post on Reddit, that's all getting vacuumed up into ChatGPT and Grok or whatever. So that's all being put into an even bigger archive, which is training AI in, as an LLM. So this is, to me, even more comforting, because, I guess there are a lot of people who find it offensive, the idea that some AI company is using their content to train their model, and they feel like they're being replaced by the computer, which I understand. But to me, I welcome this, because to me, this means that all of my stuff is being archived twice. There's the video that I uploaded, and then there's whatever data Google can, extract from it to train their AI model. So like I'm saying, in the future, it's unlikely that somebody's really going to stumble onto one of my videos. But it is very likely that people are going to interface with AI. So in 100 years, somebody is going to pull up a chatbot, whatever the equivalent of a chatbot is at that point, and they're going to ask something, and an answer is going to pop up. And somewhere in that answer is going to be me. They're not going to see my name, or they're not going to see my face, so they won't know it's me. But it is me, or at least part of me, mixed in with everybody else. And the beauty of this is that you don't even have to try. You don't even have to intentionally leave something behind, because everything we're doing on the computer is now just a part of AI. So it's not just about uploading YouTube videos, but everything you write into like Google Docs, even if you don't put it out, Google's doing something with it. Somewhere in the terms of service that you didn't read, you gave them permission to use your Google Docs and your emails to train AI. So all of us at this point, if you've spent any time online, we're all a part of this huge hive mind that we couldn't opt out of if we wanted to. And this thing, more so than the consumer internet, is really going to live forever, because at some point they're going to compress it all down and put it on a spaceship or something and shoot it out into space. And the AI hive mind that has been trained on all of our thoughts and everything we've done, it's all going to live there somewhere, and it's not going away. The great tragedy that I think of, I do think about this sometimes, is think about how many people have lived throughout human history who never got to leave a trace. They just were born, they did whatever it is they did in their lifespan, and then they died. And there is no record of their existence. Maybe they tried to leave something behind, but at this point, enough time went by and things turned to dust, and eventually they're just gone. And that's unfortunate, but that was just, how time worked out for them. But us, you watching this, me making this video, we don't exist on that timeline anymore, because we exist on a timeline of living in the moment and also putting things down in a permanent archive, putting things down in a way that will never, ever be gone. And that's my great hope for the future. And maybe it seems narcissistic, maybe it is, but what I'm looking for here is not attention, because I know that is fleeting. Sometimes I have a video that gets a bunch of views and it goes away after a while because people do move on, and I accept that. So what I'm looking for is not attention or fame. What I'm looking for is not to be deleted.